Hello and welcome to How Loss Affects Us. Today we're going to have a good one. I would be lying if I didn't say that I'm a little bit nervous about the talk, but I think that it's an important one. And but before we jump into that, are you noticing the new glasses? So I got these new glasses. And they're to help me read. So I don't wear them all the time, but they're definitely helpful. So I think they make me look studious. I don't know, what do you think? So, like I said, today we're gonna talk about an interesting topic. But before we jump into the topic, and the topic today is, can you grieve someone who's alive? And I'm gonna take these off because I'm noticing that you can see my lighting behind me, and I don't want that to be distracting for anybody. But the question becomes, and I want you guys to think about this, is can you grieve someone who's still alive? Have you thought about that? Is it something you personally have had to go through? Is it something that maybe somebody that you love and you know has gone through or is going through right now? And it's a little bit personal for me because I have somebody who's dear to me that's going through it, and it's going to be hard for me to talk about today, but that's okay. That's what we do, is we get through it. But before we do that, and before we dive in, and I've had some people say, hey, sometimes you get really deep. So I want to be careful with that because I know that sometimes that isn't good for everyone. But if I do go deep, I want to make sure that you understand that, I want to bring it back to the high level too. So if it gets too deep for you, I want to encourage you to be okay with that. And really just try to listen to the takeaway that I have in my talk today each and every week. So this week was a very exciting week because I launched something new, and it's a new product, and I launched it because I had so many people ask me for it, and I think it's a remarkable idea. So I am not taking any credit for this, but what I am going to do is I'm going to deliver on it. So this past week, I launched a new product, and the new product is for anyone. And let me just ask you if you've ever been in this scenario. So you hear a friend, a loved one, someone you get the call, and you say, oh my gosh, I can't believe this, so-and-so died. And this is somebody that maybe is a friend of a friend, is somebody slightly more distant in the family, but somebody that you care about. And when you hear that something has happened, right? So many of us, our first reaction is like, oh my gosh, someone died. I'm worried about my friend. I'm worried about somebody else. What do I do? Right? Do I call them? Do I pick up the phone and give them a call? Do I just send them a text? Do I physically go to where they are? Like, these are all questions that a lot of people have. What do I do? And I think it's such a question because you really do care, and you want to make a difference, and you want to, when you inherently see that someone else is in pain, someone is suffering, I think inherently we all want to help, but we don't always know what to do. So I've created a product that's going to help with that, and I call it grief coaching for someone that you love. So I've tried to make it really simple for you as the person who cares the most about the person that's hurting. And so all you do is so it's a grief coaching package. You can find it on my website, and that's at griefinspired.com. And all you do is you go in, you pay for the package, and you give me information on the person. So I'll call you and say, tell me, who is the person? Who did they lose? When did this happen? Can I have their email and their phone number? And that's really all that you have to do. And then what happens is I take it from there. So you can I'll send a note, I'll place a phone call, I'll let them know that someone has gifted them some coaching and someone to talk to. And, and I likely won't even say coaching. I'll say, somebody that cares a lot about you thinks that you could use somebody to talk to right now. And that's what I do. And let's have a phone call. And and the question becomes is, well, why do you do this? What's the benefit? Well, it's a package. It's something that you can do that's something better than just buying people flowers. Like, I talk all the time, no more flowers. Like, I hate flowers around any type of grieving and death, because usually they're cut flowers, and usually those cut flowers die as well. And so, yes, they're beautiful for a few days, but what you don't think about is that a week later, or however many days it is, you're left with a vase of flowers sitting on your counter, sitting on your table, sitting next to your bedside, that is like drooping and weeping and essentially dead itself. And I find that really challenging. But what you can do is you can immediately reach out, you can show that you can care, but I think the bigger thing is you can encourage them to get support. And you can do that in a way that's not uncomfortable for you, right? So I'm trying to make it as comfortable for you as possible and really get the person who's suffering, the person who's grieving, the most support, because I feel like that's what they really need. So you're taking the concern for them off of the table in terms of not wanting to say, I don't need support, I don't want to, so people don't want to pay for it, one, for themselves because they're deep in grief, and then they don't want to admit that they actually need it. None of us, in terms of getting support, most of us say, no, I'm fine, right? There's this fine, we're not fine, right? When things like this happen, and Tom, thank you for being here. Tom is my cohort, my buddy. I love what you do, Tom. So make sure you drop your link in here. If you are a man who's grieving and you want to have communication, Tom's got the male angle, which I think is so powerful. But the idea of the gift is really to allow you to do something, to take the concern off the table for them, right? Because you're almost guilting them a little bit into getting support. And that's okay, because they're really going to be grateful once they get the support. And in terms of, the value, what are you giving them? Well, you're gifting them the right person to talk to. Somebody who will actually understand what's going on and what they're likely experiencing. So many people that I talk to who are deep in grief say, you know what, there's people who are there, there's people who wanted to help, there's people who wanted to talk and who tried to say things to me, but they kind of said the wrong things, and they didn't really get it, and they just told me kind of to get better. And it's a process. That doesn't happen. You cannot get better from grief overnight. So it's really giving them somebody to talk to who's a neutral third party, who's going to listen, who's not going to give them, not judge anything, because there's no emotional, connectedness on my side. I'm just listening because I'm 100% there for them and their loss. And likely if you're in their sphere, well, then you're going through something too. And maybe it's just feeling grief, residual grief from them because you know how much they're hurting. Or maybe you're grieving too. And I have a package for that. But the point of it is it's really giving somebody somebody to talk to feel at the end of the conversation, to feel a little bit lighter, to know what's normal. To know that everything that they might be going through right now is very much, it feels like you're the only one that's going through it. And the reality is it's not. I was chuckling yesterday with one of my dear friends, and and she was like, you're spot on with what I'm feeling. And I'm like, well, yeah, we feel like we're all alone. But the grief process, there's nuances, But overall, there's a lot of things that come up, you know, in terms of the guilt and the fear and the anticipation, and, you know, all of these things, they're very, very real. So anyways, that's my offer. That's my new gift. It's called the Gift of Grief Coaching for someone that you care about. So I have it specifically for people who are grieving, and then also if you want to gift it, I've created that too. So you can go to griefeinspired.com, you can click on the coaching tab, and you can just scroll down, and you'll see where that is. And so I want to encourage you to consider that as something in addition to anything else that you might do for somebody that you care about, because getting the support is really impactful. And once people start getting it, they say, wow, like, why didn't I do this? Like, this is great. And it really is. It really is. And it's the gift that I've been given, so to help others. So today we're talking about an interesting topic, and it's something that, you know, personally, as I was preparing for it, it struck home for me in a way that I didn't expect, because I never thought of myself as someone who went through anticipatory grief, because everything that happened with my son Jackson was, you know, it was so up in the air, and I feel like, you know, I didn't really have time for grief, to think about grief when my son was in the hospital. But here's the thing: anticipatory grief. What is it, and is it real? And the question that I started this conversation with is, can you grieve someone who's still alive? And the answer to that question is absolutely. You can grieve someone who's still alive, and that's what they call it, anticipatory grief. Now, it's a label they put on it to define it so that we can talk about it. Call it whatever you want. But it's the grief that comes from anticipating that someone is going to die. So it's before the death of your loved one, or the death of someone else. And what's interesting to think about is, you know, what I want to do today is compare it a little bit to conventional grief, because it's really different. And there's some nuances about it that are very different. And it's what makes us not think about it, and not realize that when we are going through it, that we are actually in the grief process. And we might not think that because our loved one is still alive that we may not be grieving. And I'm going to challenge that, because it's likely, and I even did this for myself. Like I said, for myself, I was experiencing anticipatory grief. I didn't know what it was at the time. I didn't know what was going on. But in retrospect and looking back, absolutely 100%. So what is it? What does it do? So it's any time that you know that the outcome, that your loved one is going to pass on, or the outcome of anything, even knowing that you're going to be losing your job, that can relate to, you know, grief is all over the place, which is all I know. Like, why are people not talking about it? Because it's freaking everywhere. But if you know that something's going to happen, and you know that time is running out for the person, and that you have limited time to do what you need to do, to say what you need to say, and you know that the inevitable is likely. And, you know, you can think of it very easily, you know, thinking about if your parents are elderly, and they start to be hospitalized and things start happening, if there's somebody with a serious illness, you know, a lot of times, you know that it's touch and go. When you know that there's any chance that they could pass on, that something could happen and they could be gone, that creates anticipatory grief. And when you put someone into hospice, and hospice is the care that really just keeps people comfortable before they pass on, definitely grief happening there. And so How does it differ from conventional grief? Well, the thing of it is that oftentimes we don't know we're experiencing it, and we don't recognize that it's happening. Like I said, even in my situation, back in the day, 10 years ago, I didn't realize it. And because we don't acknowledge it and we don't realize it, we don't feel comfortable sharing what's going on and how we're feeling and the deep sadness and concern that we have. Maybe we will with people close to us, but oftentimes, we certainly, it's hard. We're seeing it more on social media, which I think is a good thing because it lets people relate. But oftentimes we wonder if we're justified in saying anything, because technically they're still alive. And the thing of it is too, is that we don't get support. Because we don't acknowledge it, because we don't know what's happening, we don't necessarily get support. And it's challenging because at the same time, right, there's oftentimes a lot of things going on in the background. So you're experiencing all of these emotions, but you're also worried about, their existing care and what's happening, and are they comfortable, and are they in pain, and what's going to happen next, and did I say everything that I meant to say, and oh my God, what does this mean for my life, and am I going to die? Now you start looking at your own death. All of these things, it's interesting, and the way I think that it's most different from conventional grief is that there's many losses, there's many things that are going on because the loss hasn't exactly happened yet. And we wonder, like, have we done enough? Is there something more that we can do? There's fear. What's going to happen next, right? What does this all mean? Am I going to be prepared to handle this? And I didn't realize my battery's low, so it's going to charge. So it's going to lose battery and probably die. So I'm going to go off the cuff here. I try to use my notes to keep me grounded and keep me where I need to be. But let me just, I debated whether or not I should share my own anticipatory grief and what that was all about. And many of you know that my son passed away 10 years ago. And so I've done a lot of grieving, but sometimes things come up, right? And it kind of takes you back and you go, hey, wait a minute. And that's what happened to me when I was preparing for this. So I'm going to share just a little bit because I think that it's relevant, and I think that it's important. So my son passed away on January 26th of 2011. And prior to that, we were obviously in the NICU because he was a premature infant. And there was a website that, this was 10 years ago, that my sister had told me about. That was, hey, you can go on this website, you can log on. It was called Caring Bridge. And I know there's a lot of websites like this now, but it was a place where I could go, I could leave one message, and then anybody that I wanted to invite to be able to see what was going on with Jack could log in and read what I wrote. So I worked very hard to make sure that I posted once a day sort of the status, because everything with his life was really touch and go. And we remained hopeful, for a long time, and we wanted to believe, but it was like one day everything was great, and then the next day, no, it was dire. And so he had undergone brain surgery, and I think my little peanut undergoing brain surgery was hard in and of itself. But what they were doing was they were draining fluid from his brain, and they wanted to see, he was experiencing hydrocephalus, which is where your brain starts to swell. And if your brain swells too much, that's a bad thing because your skull is a certain size. And so that can cause other problems. And so they didn't know sort of how his brain was or what was going on. And so on the 22nd, he had the surgery. And I think that's, we were scared. But prior to that, I hadn't really ever thought that he was going to die. I kind of believed, right? Because I wanted to believe, I wanted to have hope. And so I remained hopeful. But the fear of that surgery kicked me into where I think I started experiencing anticipatory grief. And he made it through the hospital, or made it through the surgery, and he was back to us, but we still didn't know. And what had happened was they put him on a ventilator for the surgery, and so that he could undergo anesthesia. And what I didn't know is he would never come off that ventilator until we chose to remove that ventilator from him. But that was the 22nd. On the 23rd, all we could really do was ask for strength. I couldn't really post much of anything. On the 24th, we prayed with people and we said, please give us strength, because that's where it started getting really hard. And here's where I'm gonna cry. But we're gonna get through it. It's fine. It's fine. See, it's fine. I even do it to myself. Let me take a drink of my coffee. So on the 25th, they had done a brain scan to determine what the results from the surgery were. Basically, they wanted to be able to see what his brain was like, what had happened, if he had, if he basically was, just living on his brainstem, or if he could potentially recover. And they discovered that indeed his brain had been damaged so much from the pulmonary hemorrhage that he had had shortly after birth that he wasn't going to really recover, and that he wasn't going to have any quality of life. And so that's when we had to start making the decisions. And like I said, my anticipatory grief had already started kicking in, because it's like, well, do we do this? Do we not do this? What do we do? What does this mean? And they had already been telling us, like, if he does live, right, and if he does survive all of this, he's going to be severely impaired. And so that's a whole more anticipatory grief, right? Because it's anticipating, well, the life that you expected for him is no longer, like, that's not possible. And so it's like, well, we just want him to live. It's okay, no matter what his, we just want him to live. And so that's scary too. And then thinking, like, can I be a parent to be of a child that's disabled? And am I strong enough, right? These are all the things that are going off in my head. And so it was a really hard time. And when we knew for sure that it was that it basically was hopeless, and we had to decide, do we want to let him suffer because we knew that he was in pain, or did we let him go peacefully? And that is not an easy decision to make for anyone. And I think that, I bring up this story because that's what anticipatory grief is. It's not knowing whether or not what you're doing is right. It's not knowing what the outcome is going to be. It's being scared to death of what could happen, being scared to death of what couldn't happen. And so it's very, very real. And so I want to make sure that, if you're watching this and you know someone who's going through, who has someone who's seriously ill in the hospital, you should know for sure that they are absolutely grieving already. And on, the day before we had decided that we were going to end life support, I couldn't do anything else but pray. And, yeah. And I prayed to Mary the Memorare, and if you know that, if you're Catholic, that is a magnificent prayer that I will not read here today because I would be a bawling mess. But I will post it below so that if you're interested and you want to see what that is, you're welcome to read it. But I think the final phase of anticipatory grief is the acknowledgement that it's over and that there's nothing that you have to do, and there's nothing that you can do, and you just have to get through the rest of it. And there's a fear because you don't know, right? We don't see death. We don't see what's going to happen. And I'm going to lighten this up by saying that my experience, once I got into the situation where we knew we were going to remove life support, and I was able to hold my son, it was magnificent. And it was beautiful, and there wasn't pain. Like, once I surrendered and I said, this is happening, I have no idea what's going to happen next. When you finally surrender, I think some of the grief lifts. And I spent 6 hours with him, holding him. And somebody was with me. I'm sure of it. I'm sure that there was someone protecting, whether you call it God or anything else. I call it God. And my anticipatory grief ended once I knew it was going to be over. And he peacefully drifted away. And it was a magnificent experience for me, because all of that time that I had him, once we had decided, it was nothing short of beautiful, and there wasn't pain. And I didn't start feeling real pain again until we left the hospital. And that's when conventional grief starts. And so I spend most of my time talking about conventional grief because it's what we know. But I think the takeaway of this talk today is that anticipatory grief is very real. It's challenging in its own ways. It deserves to be noticed. It deserves to be spoken. Because in some ways it's harder. It tends to be shorter than conventional grief, but it tends to be harder. And so if you know somebody who's there, who's grieving, and you're not sure what to do, I want to encourage you, reach out to me and let's talk about it. I'm happy to speak with anybody and help, because it means so much, and like Tom said earlier in the talk, grief needs to be spoken. We need to talk about it. And it doesn't have to all be tears and pain, because, when I look on my loss and I think on how much Jackson has given me, I look back on that experience with so much love. A lot of pain, but that doesn't mean you can't have love. And it's immense. It's the day that I learned what it actually truly means to be a mother and to love someone so much that you put their life before yours. And I think that is all you can do as part of anticipatory grief. And so I just want you to know that if you're going through it, if it's something that you've seen somebody go through, or maybe something that you will go through someday, you could be watching this and not know that one day you might be in this situation. And then maybe you'll be in a position to say, you know what, it is okay to get support. I know what this is. This is anticipatory grief. This is very real. My feelings are valid. Everything, my fear and all of my concerns are absolutely valid. And I think the thing to know is that you can get through it. And again, it goes back to everything that I always say. No one should grieve alone. Please don't grieve alone. Get support. Reach out to me. Reach out to a therapist. Reach out to your clergy. Reach out to whoever it is that you think can help you. The point is just reach out and don't stop searching until you find the kind of support that you need. And so again, I want to just wrap up by saying, I want to encourage you, go check out my website. There are more of these. I post these up onto YouTube. So if you want to see the other episodes of How Loss Affects Us, you can find me and you can watch them on replay. And if you do, please let me know and leave me a comment if this has been helpful for you, or if you need to, if you need to share it with someone else. If you're even thinking that, please do it, because they can choose not to watch it. But if they don't know that it exists, they can't learn from it, and they can't know that they're not alone. And that's the big thing. No one should grieve alone. So I'm gonna sign off here, and I want to make sure, I don't want this to feel too heavy, right? I want it to touch your heart. That's why I share my story. But it's important that you know that this is part of our experience of life. And we have to talk about it. And there's, like that movie, I love that movie, Collateral Beauty. If you haven't seen it, it's so good. But there's a beauty in the pain, and these things that come together. There's such a dichotomy that there's beauty, and there's love, and there's pain. But what I want for people is to be able to step through the pain, realize that the pain is temporary, that the intense grief that you experience is temporary, and what you can end up on the back end is with a whole lot of love and a whole lot of hope and a whole lot of compassion and empathy, so that when it happens to somebody that you know, you could say, me too. I know what that pain is. I know what it feels like. And I want to encourage you to get through it. And to know that you can, and that there's hope, and you can laugh again, and you can smile again, and you can do things, and you can make your life have more meaning, because you're doing it to honor the people that you've lost. And so the more people that you've lost really means the more people that you have to honor. So you have work to do with this life that you have left before you pass on. You have a choice. How to use it, what it's going to mean, where it's going to go. And I think that that's a good thing. But we can do it together. So just let me know if I can help. If I can help you, reach out. That's why I'm here. It's why I was put on the planet. It's why I believe that I lost my son. It's why I've been given this gift. And now it's my job to use it, and that's what I'm doing. So let me use it. Reach out to me, and let's get through this together. Have a great week. Happy Memorial Day. Take time to rest when you can. Recoup, recharge. I know that's what I'll be doing this weekend. And just enjoy the people that you have in your life, and remember how much you love them. My name's Catherine. This is Grief Inspired, and this is How Loss Affects Us. Thanks for watching.